Well, hello, and welcome to the next episode of HR Tech Chat. We're very happy to have you. And we are also very happy to have as our guest today, Ahmad Noordin, who is Senior HR Director of Coremark International. I'll let him explain to you folks what Coremark does. They're one of those in the background companies that does a lot that you're not aware of. And Ahmad has a fantastic story to share with us today around consistency in HR technology across a broad geographic footprint for a large organization. Welcome, Ahmad.
Great. Thank you, Brent. Glad to be here. So just to kind of kick it off, Cormark is a Fortune 250 company, and we're one of the largest marketers of fresh foods and other supplies to the convenience store industry. And we're spread out across US and Canada. We have about 32 divisions or distribution centers, and we have around 7,500 employees. And really over time, in addition to just food, we have added on other services such as marketing programs and technology, BI reporting, and other differentiators to help convenience store industry.
Interesting. Now, and that's phenomenal, fantastic. And, I have been to plenty of convenience stores in my lifetime, and all of the the gas station convenience store sort of combo. And you go in there and you don't really think about it. There's so much supply chain management and logistics and warehouse management and everything that goes into that. And who are their suppliers? You never think about that, but that is a huge gargantuan undertaking. And the hats off to Coremark for being able to kind of pull that off. Now I understand that you folks have a deployment with UKG. There's some history there with UltraPro. Before obviously the mother of all mergers, which I like to call it. And that's a good thing. But I know that you have sort of a legacy history with UltraPro, and you've expanded recently. Can you get into that a little bit and just explain, what was happening for you, and what were some of the challenges, and where you're going now with the deployment to sort of unify things and just bring some order to the chaos?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. And because Cormark has primarily been, and we're a 130-year-old company, but we've grown both organically but also through acquisition. And what happens, as you can imagine, right, with acquisitions, you're tacking on more businesses, and you're trying to streamline the processes, the people aspect of it, and then the technology, not just the HR technology, but warehouse technology, driver technology, and other things, since the bulk of our employees are warehouse workers and truck drivers. So when it came to, from an HR standpoint, knowing that the company continues to grow through acquisition, we wanted to make sure that, in some companies I've gone in, I have really looked for best of breed solutions, right? Go get the best LMS, go get the best payroll system, so on and so forth. But in our case, because not only have we grown through acquisition, but we're also we have been decentralized, meaning that each of the divisions have really had most of the control and governance in how they run their business. And it has really helped us from a standpoint of the division or the distribution center. They know their market, they know their customers, they can locally source the talent there, right? And even the products and the makeup of the convenience stores that they're serving. But as the company has continued to grow as an organization, we have made a decision to centralize things where it makes sense and continue to localize where needed. So trying to have a very decentralized business, trying to get that business centralized, and knowing that we're a company that grows through acquisition in many cases, we needed one comprehensive system that can really help us kind of cover all of our bases. And that's why I think we decided, let's not go for best of breed point solutions and really kind of go after the one-stop shop, which in some companies doesn't work. In ours, it seems to be working well.
Yeah. And that's interesting. We talked about this a few weeks ago, Ahmad, and it was just intriguing to me. Just this idea from a conceptual standpoint, right? You have a decentralized, sprawling organization. I think we can say sprawling. You guys have a
Mhm.
very broad geographic. That's probably an understatement, right? And there are advantages to leaving some of that governance to those those outposts, those satellites, whatever you want to call them. They're closest to the action. They understand the facts on the ground. Hate to use military analogy because it's overused, but you get your guys in the command center, and then you have the folks out there in the field, in the trenches, and they're saying, hey, no, don't do this, we got to do that, right? And so you have to, or you think about even automotive manufacturing, on the shop floor, the manufacturing floor, the production floor, right? Where this was a lesson that was learned several decades ago, where at least some of the auto manufacturers learned it, right? Where the engineers really needed to learn to listen to the folks working on the assembly line. You'd say, hey, look, don't build this part this way because this causes ABC, and then XYZ happens to the customer, in a year. So these sorts of things. So there's definitely the advantage there, but that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be some sort of centralized planning or centralized purview or overview, right? And this is
Mhm.
what's so interesting to me, and maybe you could elaborate on a little bit more, is this the idea that it's, as with most things, it's almost never an either or
Right.
scenario. It's a both. Can you elaborate on that? Like, what's just some examples of where that local governance makes more sense, and where you really can't have the localities doing A, B, and C. It needs to be done centrally.
Yeah, very, very good point. And when we think of centralization, one of the things that comes to me is, or having consistency, enterprise consistency. If you're an employee and you're working in one division or one office, you decide to take a role in a different division, or a distribution center, there should be some level of consistency, right, with your role, with the expectations that you have, with the benefits that you're getting, how you're getting paid, kind of your Maslach, your level one stuff, right?
Yeah.
And those are the things that we feel like we should and can centralize. Now we do have HR presence in each of our distribution center, and that HR person is aligned with the person running that distribution center. But at the same time, you just imagine 32 distribution centers trying to figure out how to do their, HR policy, or how to do leave administration, or how to pay people, how to train people, right? And that's where having that global consistency comes in very handy. And some of the other byproducts of that is you have economies of scale. From a cost standpoint, you can have a national contract with temp agencies, right, versus each distribution center trying to do their own. But at the same time, because they know that market really well, they're able to. We know that some divisions, they can cater to the gig workers more than others. And in some of these other divisions or distribution centers, temp and full-time employees is what works. So we can really kind of give them all of the options, and they can kind of use, the option that works best for them. But if we're doing gig workers in, a certain distribution centers and it's working well, how
Mhm.
can we take that best practice and see if we can replicate that? And that's one of the reasons why we said, okay, let's try to centralize and knowledge sharing, technology sharing, and process sharing.
Can you delve into that a little bit more, because that's super interesting. I think is this idea of what kind of employees do you have, or employees, air quotes, um, or maybe not, that are gig workers? Like, what types of roles are they doing? Are these drivers, or other types of roles? Like, who are the gig workers?
Yeah, and we're kind of just getting into this because traditionally that's not an area we're focused on. but we do want to look at all of the options, right? And especially we know that the talent market's really tight, especially in US with the unemployment benefits that people have access to, additional stimulus checks coming in.
Yeah,
You really need to entice employees to show up for work, and our peers and even larger companies, right? The big ones, they're having the same challenges, and you can only do so much in terms of continuing to compete from a wage and benefit standpoint. And so in some cases, there's certain roles, especially in a warehouse environment, where yeah, you could plug and play. Now you're not going to obviously, with the employees you have full time, they build that experience and the expertise over time. They understand the nuances of how to do that job, doing it the Cormark way, right? The employee, the values, and all those types of things, and especially roles that are facing customers. We're not obviously putting gig workers there, but we know that there are some kind of warehouse roles in certain markets where we are able to bring folks in for a night shift, do some warehouse work, and be on their way. And we still have kind of the framework and the overarching management team at that division, which is full-time or employees and so on.
yeah. So one thing that I heard there that was very intriguing is this idea that you mentioned, the core mark way, which is important for any brand, right? You have to project. You have a lot of these folks, they're your customer, like your end customer is or where, excuse me, where your end customer comes into contact with a person at your end customer comes into contact with a person that's working for you, right,
Right.
is at the convenience store. It's probably the manager there or the person running the counter, right? And so you need those gigs. Guess what I'm getting at is that's intriguing to me, that having a consistency or a central overview or a control tower, if you want to call it, for the a control tower for the employer brand, or for,
Right.
for or for the external brand. Yeah.
Yeah. And just to expand on that, to your point, we, prior to me coming here, the organization looked at the sales force and said, how can we make sure, since the sales force is out there interacting with the customers, how can we make sure that's centralized? And again, when I see centralized, I don't mean just like bodies moving into a corporate office, right? But it's really all on the same page. They're singing the same tune, and there's consistency. You have one salesperson walk in and is working on a contract, or relationship with a customer at a convenience store,
Mm.
and maybe that person moves on. The next person at Cormark should be able to pick it back up and continue to have that same level of service. Um, Exemplifying the family values, and that's one of the things that drew me to Cormark as well. Most companies have their own kind of branding to why you should come work for us, employer of choice and those types of things. Here, what lured me is we're a family, and I know a lot of companies say that, but I see that value playing out each and every day, and then I think that's what we're trying to make sure that customers are also seeing that.
Yeah, yeah. I want to go back for a minute here to this idea of you mentioned LMS just as in passing, but you mentioned it in the basically what I want to do is sort of corroborate what you're saying. It's this idea that your LMS, you want that to be sort of one thing. Um, and the idea, I think, is that, so in my previous role as one of the large vendors of LMSs, and we were involved, we would work with existing customers to help them figure out their just figure out what they wanted to do, what was their scenario, what did they need, right? And we spoke with, so one of the customers, I can't name who they were, but it was a large automobile manufacturer. And I won't say what city we went to because that'll give it away. But in any event, um, um, they had a global I think she was the LMS director, director of learning. I might be mangling her title, but she had a high level title. She was that was her charter. She was responsible for making sure learning happened across the organization. But they had a sprawling organization, and all of these sort of fiefdoms across the
Yeah.
sprawling geographic footprint, where they were all doing their own thing learning wise. They were all doing learning things,
Yeah.
right? They were doing learning, but all in their own way. And there was a lack of um, of a sense of urgency and a lack of motivation to adopt the corporate LMS, right?
Right.
To do that, and that was a huge issue for them. So we went in there and we helped them sort of map out, ideate, and these sorts of things of how they could put together a governance model that might, and I won't get into the details, but that might help them, sort of herd the cats and get all these folks singing from the same hymn book, so that they could get some of that information that they needed, that the LMS would capture through, one source of truth, so that they could, you know, plan for the future and start, and I guess there's a parallel there with just about anything, in terms of, I don't know. This was not my intent when I brought up this story, but I think we may have stumbled into the whole compensation, the whole comp module piece of the picture that I know that you guys are looking at.
Yeah, no, you're right. By the way, I have implemented that LMS in a prior life. It's
Oh,
where we
you
all
have.
go there. It was a phenomenal system. But yeah, I think as we're looking at transforming ourselves and centralizing operations and making things more consistent, one of the big pieces is the compensation. And when I say compensation, I mean the job, right? The roles need to be consistent. There has to be some reliance on, when a person walks in, what role are they walking into, and what are the parameters from a job structure, from a compensation, and those types of things. And so that's one of the areas that we have highlighted as a high priority for us. So I mean, the good thing that I've seen with Cormark so far is we know there are a lot of things we can go work on. We've tried to identify kind of our 3 or 4 big rocks as an organization, and obviously by department. And so for HR, one of the things is like making sure we have consistency around roles and jobs. And to help facilitate that, having a compensation module. So, we started implementing UKG as a company in summer of 2016, in Canada and then US, starting with the core payroll and HRS system, and then over time layering on the recruiting, onboarding, and performance. Now we're at a point where we're ready to move off of paper-based merit planning, and we want to be doing it in the system. And we know that that system is going to drive that consistency, right? I don't have purview of how people are doing their merit planning. Well, we do. We have templates we're sending out and getting back and so on. But really getting to facilitate that through a technology, that's going to really drive home that, hey, we're going to be doing things consistently.
Mhm.
And the comp module is in the cards for second half of this year. We're just kind of about to kick that project off.
Yeah, I would say it's time. That must be uh, well, let's put it tactfully. That must be a real challenge, sifting through all that paper for a manual process for.
Correct. And my team also does the payroll piece of it. So
Mm.
there's a lot of, making sure it gets in the HRS system, and the bonuses get paid out and so on. And this is US and Canada. So yeah, just a lot of that. And really we want the HR managers who are in our distribution centers, we want them focused on the strategic work, right? Not now passing merit sheets around and doing all that stuff. So we're like, okay, this is going to kill a few birds with one stone, right? Get rid of some of that, the burden off of not just them, but even supervisors who are floating these around and having to reconcile things as we kind of go up the different levels, right? Until all of that's finalized. The system will obviously be able to cascade that down and up in a very cohesive manner.
Yeah, it seems to me that you really, I mean, might be just sort of putting a fine point or saying it in a different way, but it seems to me that that you can't have a central HR function in a large organization. Stop me if you can think of some examples where you can, right? But it seems to me you can't really have you can't really have a centralized HR function in a large organization that's spread across a broad geographical footprint without having technology in place today. I mean, am I being Captain Obvious right now, or I, maybe you could elaborate, help me with this point, because I think I might have mangled it, but I'm trying to get to something here.
Oh yeah, no, you're totally right because technology can, there's a people component, right? We talk about people process technology, people process and right? That's a very generic term. But really, there's just so many bodies you can put on processes that are inefficient. And the best way to do it is you make those processes efficient, streamlined, and technology plays a big role in that, right? Being able to give the right level of access, having the right workflows for different audiences. And the other thing I like about technology is when a lot of times when people think of an HR system and now we're going to create these workflows, people just assume that we're all going to do it exactly the same way. And we know that's not the case, right? Corporate, even at the division level, at the distribution center level, depending on the type of distribution center, we may have nuances, right? If they're unionized, non-unionized, so and other reasons why we would do that. So it doesn't have to be kind of a all or none kind of a situation. We can use technology and still get some customizations where it's needed, so we don't lose that local process. And in some cases, there are local compliance things that need to be facilitated. And I'm a big fan of technology just because I can sleep at night peacefully knowing that from a compliance and auditing standpoint, we have the technology we can turn to and see, look back and see how things were accomplished, report on things, and so on and so forth. Having to do that without technology in this day and age, with all of the regulations, compliance, data privacy, SOX. I mean, you can, California is looking at, Consumer Protection Act, enacting that for employees. How to do that without technology is just, would be impossible.
Yeah, yeah. You touched on the regulatory environment, and at some point technology is just absolutely essential with that. Several moons ago, I was involved with one of another vendor in the space, and I learned much more. I've forgotten it all now, but I learned way more than I wanted to about the Affordable Care Act, which was that was a huge ramp up at that time. And and this particular vendor, and I think they were right. They were essentially, their message was, you need the right kind of technology in order to comply with the Affordable Care Act. You literally could be out of compliance and not mean to be, just by accident, because you would not have the right technology in place, and look back periods and all this kind of stuff. So it can get very, very complex.
Yeah,
um
and I'll just add, and technology can facilitate doing it kind of in a more centralized and enterprise way versus each location or each part of each business having to figure out on their own, do it their own way, and then having to audit and make sure those things are in place. It's much easier to kind of set that baseline using that technology.
Oh, that can be an absolute, I mean, that can be a real bowl of spaghetti if
Right.
without, how's that for a metaphor? I mean, yeah, compliance is something you definitely want to centralize. I would say, if there's any absolute, there's so few absolutes, right? We've been talking about you need both, not one or the other, right? But if you want to talk about absolutely, this might be wrong too, but I would hazard, I would put a small amount of, we won't bet because it's especially on Zoom, I think it's illegal to bet, but if we were to bet, I would put a
Yeah.
small, maybe $10 on the idea that, if you want to centralize anything, you should centralize compliance.
For sure. And also because you want to be consistent going forward. And how you show up as an how you show up to the employees. It's not just about, covering your, right? Compliance is really making sure you do the right thing for the employees, you do the right thing for the company, and you're doing it in a consistent way where it's setting precedents, right? And having centralization from a people, process, and technology to make sure that you're setting the right precedents, you have the reporting in place, and then you're doing good right by for the employee, for the organization as well.
Yeah, yeah. Being in compliance is one of those things that, your workforce isn't really going to appreciate or notice when you're in compliance. But if you're out of compliance, uh, that can be a big blow to the employer brand. To be frank, yeah. Um, Leadership. What role does leadership play in all this? In terms of wrestling all the moving parts and just kind of making this happen. Like, what's the role of leadership in getting the right technology in place and all of this?
Yeah, very, very good point. And I'm lucky to say that the leader I have, the CHRO, she's very focused on the change management, the people aspect, and not just stakeholdering for the sake of checking a box and saying, we got everyone's approval and everyone said they'll go along with it, and then you kind of drag people through it and say, well, you said you're okay with getting dragged through the through the change, right?
Right.
um, but we have in several cases since I've come here, we have taken a stance, we have tested the water, we have done the change work, and we have seen the response from the organization, and we have tweaked how we're going to proceed, versus like, well, it's like a steamroller. You're doing all this, you have this change management apparatus, but you're still steamrolling.
Yeah.
I see a lot of stopping and reversing and, staying in neutral for a while, seeing how things play out, changing the direction if needed. And so my leaders kind of exemplifying that behavior, and I can see that across the executive team. So there, in some companies, you kind of you start from the grassroots, right? You make sure there's going to be support in the field, and then you kind of get to a point where you're ready to present your implementation plan to the executive team. Here, what I see is the executive team's the first team that gets hit up. They're the ones who we make sure is fully aligned, and then we go to the rest of the organization. And I think in many cases, what organizations do, especially with technology, is you kind of go parallel path, right? The executive team is kind of on the same page, but really probably in a PowerPoint slide, not really having that. But here we go to them first and we catch them, get their feedback, get their input right up front, and make sure that's how we're deploying, whether it's technology or any other HR program. And then you have that buy-in up front, and they're helping us champion this versus just showing up to do their part, which is what I've seen in other cases, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's a great sort of picture you just drew for us, or painted. Um, something occurred to me. You're talking about top-down leadership, not top-down management, right? Which is like two different things. Like you're talking about you're talking about like a C-suite that listens and makes, you know, agree, you know, comes up with initiatives that are designed to be helpful for the organization, and then it doesn't just ram them through, but really listens and pays attention to the organization as it's happening. Not to get you know too sort of squishy here, but it's sort of it's a journey, not a destination. It's a Zen thing. It's not oh, I got to fix everything. Oh no, once I fix all this, then it'll be perfect, right?
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
think we talked about perfection last time when we spoke around this idea that you're never going to have a perfect. It may have been another conversation I had, but it's applicable here anyway. This idea that you're never going to have a perfect deployment, or your HCM technology is never going to be perfect. You're always going to be looking to tweak it and make it better, and you're always going to have challenges that you're addressing.
Yeah, I mean, I know we've been using a lot of analogies. I'm big on analogies too, but I've used the, you're moving into a house, right?
Oh, yeah.
Day one, you're not gonna go buy new furniture. You're not gonna just, put a new porch and all those things up. It's gonna take some time. You'll get comfortable with it, and you're gonna make it your own over time. And I think that's where, some folks who have not been around technology, especially HCM implementations, they assume the day they walk in, all their problems have been solved for. But that's really your day one. And you find out certain things didn't get caught during inspection, right? You're like, okay, there's a leaky faucet. That doesn't mean maybe, hopefully, the whole plumbing system doesn't need to be, overhauled. But you should expect walking in there that you're going to have those things you're going to have to work through, and you're really putting your mark on it, right? It's not just fixing that leaky, whatever it is, but making it your own, being proud of what you did with something that was, we tried to customize it to the best of our abilities going into the, or I should say configure, right, versus customize going into the go live. But we know that really, until rubber meets the road, especially with things like manager self-service, right? Certain things like payroll, there's calculation, there's a process, right? You can get things down to a science. Other things are more of an art, and
Mhm.
you just evolve and over time, and that's one of the reasons why I got into this space, is because I could just go around implementing stuff, but the fact that my team gets to maintain it, show the value to the organization, help them uh, get the most out of it, and then figure out what the next looks like. That's where a lot of the fun is. Not just kind of that initial deployment. You all kind of nervously give each other high fives and move on with your lives. It's like, okay, well, there are these issues coming up. We new functionalities we didn't know existed, and the technology continues to evolve while you have it. So yeah, it just the fun continues, right?
It sounds rewarding. Those nervous high fives, those are the awkward ones. Um,
Especially
how,
over
how,
Zoom. And I did a recruiting system implementation a year ago, and it was all over. It was a completely Zoom, you could call it a project, a 9-month Zoom project.
oh, wow.
So, yeah.
That must have, yeah. How has UKG been in all this? What has it been like as a partner?
Yeah, UKG's been a great partner, I think, because now traditionally they have focused on mid-sized businesses, and I know that they have gotten away from that, and especially with the Kronos implementation, they are one of the premium ones. I think their level of customer service, the fact that I can text the account manager and set up a call, or just call whenever needed. Now we have different teams that support us. One team that supports us from a payroll and time and attendance standpoint. Another one, we can bounce ideas around. So there are different avenues of folks we can lean on, and they'll bring experts to the table for different modules. We needed more information on the comp module, but not just the touristy, but really like the guts of it, because we're trying to redo our job structure. And they got an expert lined up pretty quickly. She was very knowledgeable, and she's going to stay with us for as long as we need to. And these aren't, we're not getting nickel and dimed. It's really
Mhm.
building on that relationship that, hey, we're, over time, obviously, we'll be adding more modules on, but they want to they spend a lot of time on making sure we're a happy customer, and not just to keep their jobs.
Yeah, yeah. That's so important, for the vendor to be in it, to win it, to be in it for the long term, to be a real partner and helpful. Just given what we just talked about, this idea that you're going to settle into the system and you're going to learn what's going right, what you might want to change, and all these sorts of things, and so it's just critical, essential to have the right partner for that. To me, that's guiding um one of the guiding criteria that you need to consider when choosing a vendor to do some sort of a, to do a certainly to do a project of the scale that you folks are doing at Cormark.
Yeah, I agree. And my peer, who's the head of talent acquisition, she's big on customer service because a lot of times the focus is so much on the technology, the implementation, which is all important, right? But that's a small period of time, right? And the technology is as good as it's going to get in some cases. Customer service can really, it's there with you. It's like a marriage, right? It's there with you till the end of time, and sometimes it can make up for it. We can make up for the when there are flaws in the technology, right? Just having that communication, making sure our ideas are heard, they're jumping on issues that are popping up, and involving us and connecting us with other customers. So I've, my peer, she kind of put that in my head that, let's, when we go get new technologies, which we're looking at additional ones, let's make sure we focus, really on customer service, because once you go live, that's all you got, right?
Yeah. That's a great point. Let's conclude on that point, because I think that's a real good one. um, Thank you very much, Ahmad, for joining us for HR Tech Chat. Really appreciate it. This is a fascinating story. It's really illustrative of so many things that so many organizations go through, and your insight has been very helpful for our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Brent. And I appreciate being part of the advisory council. It's been a great experience.
Oh, yes. Welcome to the Global Executive Advisory Council. We're very happy to have you.
Great.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care.